Some news just coming in. Russia is bragging about its nuclear weapons, fueling dangerous arms race. Ukraine's Zelenskyy has told the Doha Forum, President of Ukraine. Zelenskyy has told the Doha Forum that Ukraine is concerned about Russia bragging about its nuclear weapons, fueling a dangerous arms race. This is what has been said by Zelenskyy. Remember, Russia has spoken not once, but on a couple of occasions about the fact that its nuclear forces are on high alert. Something to this effect was told by Russia in the month of February also, on the 28th day of February to be precise. Russia has raised this again, talking about the fact that nuclear forces are on alert, and that's an option. It can't rule out that there is a threat to its own existence. Lyudmila, you missed her from Ukraine, an MP from Ukraine is joining us. Thank you so much for your time. And I apologize if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, but do correct me. But I want to begin by asking you about this concern about, the fact that Russia has spoken about it in the past as well and continues to speak about the use of nuclear weapons in the context of US President Joe Biden being in Poland and NATO countries coming together. Does it look like that things could worsen from here on? What's the concern?
We've seen already an extraordinary escalation of the conflict from Russia's side. And to be honest, after the world didn't react to the use of chemical weapons in Syria, Russia is testing new and new borders. And it's not the first time that Russia is committing the acts of nuclear terrorism around the world. I can remind you of the poisoning of Alexander Litvinenko in the center of London with radioactive plutonium. I can remind of many more breaches of international law by Russia and capturing of the nuclear facilities during this war with Ukraine on Ukraine's territory in Chernobyl and Zaporizhia. And we see that Russia has become now as terrorist state number one and the first nuclear terrorist in the worldwide history. So obviously, when we hear threats from Russia, that's exactly they're testing the borders of what the world will actually admit Russia doing. And we already saw the use of phosphorus, which is forbidden by all international treaties around the world in Ukraine during this conflict. We already find signs of preparation for the use of chemical weapons in Ukraine. And here, I think the world should draw very strict red lines as to how far the Russian threats and Russian aggression can go, because we can expect anything. No one, I think, even a couple of months ago could expect this kind of vast war happening in the center of Europe. And no one could expect 8 years ago that some crazy person, even regardless of the interests of his own country, will redefine borders or try to redefine borders in Europe that were established after the Second World War. But here we are. We're living in a completely new reality and on the verge of Third World War. So today is the time when the world has to be as united as we can and as united as possible to counter Russian aggression. And after those threats that we're hearing on a constant basis, we have to request Russia's full nuclear and full disarmament of Russia, because that's the only way we can ensure stability and security not only in Europe, but in the entire world.
Be with us. I'm just going to request you to hold on because I'm going to bring in my colleague Gaurav Sawant, who's been reporting on the story earlier from Ukraine. And now Gaurav is in Poland. Gaurav, I'd like you to take a couple of questions from the Member of Parliament from Ukraine who is with us. Her name is Lyudmila. You missed her. And she, in fact, is talking about the fact that the only way all of this can be contained is if there is a situation where countries come together and ensure complete disarmament of Russia, or Russia is going to continue in its bloodthirsty quest of what it showed in Ukraine or what it displayed in Ukraine, and similar instances will be expected in years to come. Gaurav.
Sneha, thank you very much. And Ludmila, many thanks for being a part of our special conversation. I'm in Poland right now, and Ludmila, in a while from now, the US President Joe Biden would be speaking. I want to understand from you, ma'am, what are your expectations of the US President? I also want to understand from you, so far, whatever the North Atlantic Treaty Organization countries have done, are you satisfied with the NATO and EU response?
We're grateful that we are receiving weapons and receiving military support from our partners, and we shouldn't stop in collaborating in this way. We shouldn't stop collaborating in providing for Ukraine the means of protection of our skies and anti-missile equipment and anti-missile arms and that will protect Ukrainian sky and protect Ukraine from any sort of threats, including nuclear threat. But obviously, we can do much more on the international level, and we should be acting much quicker on the international level. We have a lot of other instruments that we didn't use so far. For example, we didn't make any considerable decision or any decisive decision on the United Nations General Assembly yet. We haven't seen the exclusion of Russia from the UN Security Council. We haven't seen the isolation of Russia in terms of gas supplies to Europe. So there are many more other things that can be done, and obviously we are grateful for the things that have already been done. But the most important right now is not.
Are you getting the 1,000 missiles every day, Ludmila? Ludmila, are you, madam, getting the 1,000 surface-to-air missiles and the anti-tank guided missiles and the anti-ship missiles that you require every day? Are you getting them from the West? Point one. Point two, what about the S-300 surface-to-air missile defense shield? Are you getting that, madam?
As far as I know, there's still negotiations going on, and I obviously cannot disclose the exact quantities of what we're getting, but obviously the help we're getting should be increased. Because we're talking now not only about defensive weapons, but we should be already talking about how we're going to clean up Ukraine's territory from the invaders. And for that, we will need much more offensive weapons to come to our country. We are ready to protect Europe. We are ready to protect the world, and we are ready to protect the democracy. Our army is fully prepared for that. So we need more weapons to be able to do that technically.
Be with us. I'm also going to bring in my colleague from Kyiv. Rajesh Pawar is with us. Rajesh, we have with us the Member of Parliament from Ukraine, Lyudmila Buymistr, and if you'd like to take a couple of questions from her on what really the expectations are vis-a-vis the meeting of the NATO countries and the expectations really from Joe Biden's visit to Poland.
Look, Sneha, as far as Ukraine is concerned and what were their expectations from Joe Biden's meeting and the NATO summit, which happened 2 days back, was to get more armaments. Their two basic demands, more military aircrafts and enforcement of no-fly zone over Ukraine. These two demands have not been even considered by NATO. They did not make any comments on that. Only thing NATO did was to reinforce their frontiers with Ukraine, Russia and Belarus. More troops there, more weapons there. They have promised some armaments to Ukraine, but let me tell you, when they deploy Patriot missiles in Poland, they like to give Soviet-era 40-year-old anti-aircraft systems, which were lying in storage in the US, to Ukraine. And I would like to ask the MP who's there, what do you think? Are you getting the latest equipment which America or NATO should be giving you, or are you getting some kind of obsolete weapons?
Also, you know, Rajesh, be with us. Lyudmila, I want to talk to you a little about the situation that you're facing right now in several cities in Ukraine vis-a-vis the human devastation which is so in your face, and the ramifications of this is going to be felt in days and weeks to come as we talk about the human crisis, the human tragedy of this war. People leaving Ukraine, many of those who are being left behind will suffer in terms of, you know, the epidemic, the outbreak of a possible epidemic, health concern. human trafficking, all of these issues is something that Ukraine will have to grapple with in days and weeks to come. And this, unfortunately, is Ukraine's new reality.
You are absolutely right. We are living in a completely new reality of a humanitarian crisis. But answering a previous question about NATO support, we're all getting impression here that NATO is preparing for the war in Eastern Europe. All the concentration of arms and military troops in Eastern Europe basically are a clear sign that NATO understands the threat, that if Ukraine will not stand, then next will be Poland, next will be the Baltics, next will be Romania, Bulgaria, etc., because Russia's ambition is to restore the Warsaw Pact and have its dominance in Eastern Europe as such. So my personal opinion, and I was always a NATO, very pro-NATO and pro-Euro-Atlantic integration of Ukraine. We have already shown that we have one of the strongest, if not the strongest, NATO army here in Ukraine, and we need to prove it by deeds. I'm not talking about even any formalities. I'm talking about concrete actions, concrete supplies of weapons, including the offensive weapons. In terms of the humanitarian situation, that's a disaster. When you're looking at the peaceful cities that 1 month ago were living their peaceful lives and now they are completely ruined, you should understand that Russia is using Syrian tactics in Ukraine. They are basically using the burned land tactics, and because they cannot take any Ukrainian city by force, they are basically ruining them with missiles, ruining them with artillery, and making them basically non-existent. We see it in Kiev region here, where the main battles were held, and in Irpin, Bucha, Gostomel, those cities don't exist anymore. Mariupol is non-existent anymore, and there at the beginning of the attack, when the city was seized, 300,000 people were staying in the city and basically were held hostage. We're receiving horror stories from every town and city that was captured by the Russians, that they're raping our children, they're raping our women, they're executing them, they're torturing people. So they're acting like complete animals, and that should not be left without reaction of the worldwide.
But Ludmila, if I may, to counter this, to counter Russia, you would require fighter jets, you would require surface-to-air missiles, you would require a no-fly zone to be declared, and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization countries have done none of this. So are you disappointed with the effort made either by US President Joe Biden and the NATO countries, or this emergency EU and NATO summit that happened? None of what you want is being fulfilled by them.
That's true, and they need to understand as soon as possible that Ukraine is not going to be the last target of Russia. The whole world needs to understand that Ukraine is now holding the shield for democracy, civilization, and democratic values. And if Ukraine falls, you will see bombs in Rome, in Budapest, in Paris, because Putin will never stop. So as quickly as the world will understand it, every hour of delay is costing Ukrainian lives, Ukrainian army's lives, and the lives of Ukrainian peaceful people and peaceful population. So it is the responsibility of the entire world right now to be more decisive in our actions and to be more united, which we haven't seen so far. And I'm speaking to lots of politicians and parliamentarians from the European countries, from the United States, and the world is still divided. That's what I have to say. The world still is divided into those who
the world is still divided. That's a very strong point you make there, and that perhaps, yes, and that's the crux of this problem. Ludmila, for joining us, many thanks. Sneha and Rajesh Pawar. You know, the point is, the unity that Ukraine seeks, the offensive weapons that Ukraine seeks, that's still not coming. And it remains to be seen in a couple of hours from now when the American president speaks. Will it just be sympathy, a pat on the back, securing securing Poland's security? That may be top of his agenda. But what about Ukraine? That remains the big question.
All
Sneha.
right. Gaurav, thanking you for the moment. We are going to leave it at that. I'm thanking Rajesh Pawar as well as Lyudmila Bumister for joining us.